excited to be hosting the launch event for the reissued edition of Jane Bowles' Two Serious Ladies and Plain Pleasures with this illustrious panel featuring Maggie Milner, Lynne Tillman, and Ann Stephenson. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping things. We'll be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A at the end of the talk tonight, so you can start thinking of your questions now. And if you're joining us on the YouTube live stream, please explore the link in the description box below to purchase a copy of Two Serious Ladies and Plain Pleasures. All right, Jane Bowles wrote a novel, a play, and just over a dozen short stories, and these were enough to establish her reputation as one of the 20th century's most original fiction writers. Two Serious Ladies is the only novel ever written by Bowles. Long held as a visionary cult classic, this subversive, anarchic, and riotous novel follows two upper-class women as they strip themselves of propriety and descend into debauchery. It now appears with a new introduction by Sheila Heti. And in Plain Pleasures, Bowles' uncanny and insidious tales present an incendiary and groundbreaking vision of the mad possibilities of literary modernism. Our lovely panelists include Maggie Milner, who is the author of Couplets, a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 selection, a New York Times Editor's Choice, and one of Atlantic's 10 Best Books of the Year, and a finalist for the LA Times Book Award in Poetry and the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Poetry. Maggie's poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry, the New Yorker, the Paris Review, and elsewhere. She is a senior lecturer at Yale and a senior editor at the Yale Review. Lynne Tillman's novels include Weird Fucks, No Lease on Life, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Fiction, and Men and Apparitions, nominated for a Republic of Consciousness Prize. Her nonfiction books include What Would Lynne Tillman Do?, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Criticism, and Mother Care, an autobiographical book-length essay on caregiving. Her recent books are Thrilled to Death, Selected Stories, and The Mystery Perception, a book-length conversation with Taylor, I should have asked how to pronounce this, Lewandowski. In early 2026, a collection of her art and culture essays called Paying Attention will be published by the David Zwirner Books. Ann Stephenson is a writer and the founder and editor of Tent Editions, an independent press focused on poetry and alternative print projects. She serves as a reading curator for the Fire Island Artist Residency and is the founder and curator of the reading series at Readings at Parkside series at the Parkside Lounge in NYC. All right, thanks for bearing with me. Without further delay, please join me in giving everyone a warm welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. First of all, I can speak on behalf of all of us to say it's a real honor to be here to speak about Jane Bowles. I sort of think of her as like the velvet underground of the writing world in being essential, extraordinarily influential, and that acclaim growing over time. So it's a real honor to be here, and Picador has these two new gorgeous reissues. I'm a big nerd and collect different covers of the editions, and it's always thrilling to see how the characters are interpreted. So these are very special. Equally interesting, though, is an introduction that anybody writes, and this Sheila Heti introduction is fascinating, and I'm excited about these. So to start off, I think Lynne is going to share something, and then Maggie as well. So take it away, Lynne.
So, well, we all have origin stories about Jane Bowles, and I won't get into that right now, but you're absolutely right, how influential she was, and encountering her really changed my attitude toward writing, or my sense of what could be written. So, in, I forget what year, Electric Literature asked for a recommendation of a book. And all of us who care about this extraordinary writer try to bring her up in any way we can. So I wrote about this, one of her stories called Everything is Nice, which is an entirely ironic title. So I'm going to read some bits of it, really, to try to explore what it is that makes her writing special. To some of us writers, Jane Bowles walks on water. Jane Bowles performed miracles in writing. For instance, she never wrote an unnecessary word. Jane Bowles' writing is unique to English and American letters, and I do mean one of a kind and original. Start reading Everything is Nice, and instantly, reader, you will be someplace else, an odd atmosphere, an altered frame of mind. So the first sentence is, the highest street in the blue Moslem town skirted the edge of a cliff. Do I think of a street as highest? No, unless I'm in London looking for a high street. Highest suggests lofty, up above, far from the ground, or foundation. The street might be floating in the sky or perilously situated, maybe not even in this world, so very high up. The blue Moslem town. The joining of blue and Moslem colors everything. A whole town is blue, and it is Moslem. A blue Moslem town must be different, very different from what I know. It's everyone and everything in it blue. The mood and emotions blue. The verb skirted. A narrow strip lies around this blue town, maybe female territory. There's something insubstantial, barely touching off to the side. Skirted is the action that motives to the sentence's predicate, the edge of a cliff. More danger, an edge, worse, a cliff. The story starts at a precipice it could fall into. Bowles entraps dreams, fantasies, waking life, conscious and unconscious thoughts in one sentence, one net. That was one sentence. She fuses these realms in her story and presents them fluidly as a matter of fact. Her very short puppet play about two American sisters, a quarreling pair, performed in 1945 before Beckett's Waiting for Godot, 1953, turns on a glass of milk. I have read and reread Jane Bowles' writing and contemplated her masterwork, Two Serious Ladies, her one novel, many times. I wrote a film script based on it, hoping to direct it. Still, I remain surprised, even dumbfounded, by how she does it. I don't know how to name what she does. There is no magic act, even if she has performed a sleight of hand. Unexpected encounters are ordinary and also peerless. The expected is both usual and unusual. You may sense being an other to yourself. Once inside one of her tales, there is no outside. Jane Bowles might have felt a stranger to herself. She knew intimately that life was very weird and often painful. It was also frightening to her. That's what she represented in her writing. All existence is absurd, and all societies unforgiving and alienating. This is life, she tells us. This is how life goes. Existence is mean and absurd, but there can be beauty and even joy, if only for a moment that will pass by like a glance or a hand brushing a cheek. So in Everything is Nice, her protagonist, Jeannie, or Jeannie, G-E-N-I-E, rushes out, anyway, into the strange, harsh world to find it and feel it before it goes.
That was great. Thank you. And then Maggie was going to read probably my favorite Jane Bowles story from Plain Pleasures.
Yeah,
Or part of it.
I think I'll read part of it. And then, yeah, I'll read part of it, and I'll skip around a bit. Okay, so this that was so beautiful. Jane Bowles is she's so often writing about I guess serious ladies, but also kind of just like truly eccentric, often women characters. Who, even when they're not children, retain maybe a sense of kind of a childlike quality in the world. This particular story is my favorite Well, I don't know if it's my favorite story. Camp Cataract is so good. And I posit more novelistic than this book. We don't talk about that. But this but this story, A Stick of Green Candy, is at least tied for my favorite, and it's about a little girl who goes and plays in a clay pit every day. She goes out, walks into town, skips over the playground, finds this like empty pit of clay, and then she hangs out in it all day by herself. Sort of by herself. There's a regiment of soldiers, presumably imaginary, who she's in charge of, who are with her in the pit, but materially, tangibly, she's alone. Okay, so I'm gonna read like a little chunk to give y'all a vibe of this story from I'm gonna skip the first third where the clay pit is sort of established as a setting. Now I'll go to, and her name is Mary, this little girl. Now I'll go to my headquarters, she announced in a flat voice. I'll be back with the team lists in 25 minutes. She glanced up at the highway. She felt oddly disappointed and uneasy. A small figure was descending the stone steps on the other side of the highway. It was a boy. She watched in amazement. She had never seen anyone come down these steps before. Since the highway had replaced the old country road, the family living in the hilltop house came and went through the back door. Watching the boy, she felt increasingly certain that he was on his way down to the pit. He stepped off the curb after looking prudently for cars in each direction, then he crossed the highway and clambered down the hill. Just as she had expected him to, when he reached the edge of the pit, he seated himself on the ground and slid into it, smearing his coat, dark brown like her own, with clay. It's a big clay pit, he said, looking up at her. He was younger than she, but he looked straight into her eyes without a trace of shyness. She knew he was a stranger in town. She had never seen him before. This made him less detestable. Nonetheless, she had to be rid of him shortly, because the men were expecting her back with the team lists. Where do you come from? She asked him. From inside that house, he pointed at the hilltop. Where do you live when you're not visiting? I live inside that house, he repeated, and he sat down on the floor of the pit. Sit on the orange crate, she ordered him severely. You don't pay attention to your coat. He shook his head. She was exasperated with him because he was untidy and he had lied to her. She knew perfectly well that he was merely a visitor in the hilltop house. Why did you come out this door? She asked, looking at him sharply. The people in that house go out the back. It's level there and they've got to drive. I don't know why, he answered simply. Where do you come from? She asked again. That's my house. He pointed to it as if she were asking him for the first time. The driveway and back's got gravel in it. I've got a whole box of it in my room. I can bring it down. No gravel's coming in here that belongs to a liar, she interrupted him. Tell me where you come from, and then you can go get it. He stood up. I live in that big house up there, he said calmly. From my room I can see the river, the road down there, and the road up here, and this pit, and you. It's not your room, she shouted angrily. You're a visitor there. I was a visitor last year at my aunt's. Goodbye. He was climbing out of the pit. Once outside, he turned around and looked down at her. There was an expression of fulfillment on his face. I'll bring the gravel sometime soon, he said. She watched him crossing the highway. Then, automatically, she climbed out of the pit. She was mounting the tedious stone steps behind him. Her jaw was clamped shut and her face had gone white with anger. She had not turned around once to look at her. As they were nearing the top, it occurred to her that he would rush into the house and slam the door in her face. Hurriedly, she climbed 3 steps at once so as to be directly behind him. When he opened the door, she pushed across the threshold with him. He did not seem to notice her at all. Inside the dimly lit vestibule, the smell of fresh paint was very strong. After a few seconds, her eyes became more accustomed to the light, and she saw that the square room was packed solid with furniture. The boy was already pushing his way between 2 identical bureaus, which stood back to back. The space between them was so narrow that she feared she would not be able to follow him. She looked around frantically for a wider artery, but seeing that there was none, she squeezed between the bureaus, pinching her flesh painfully, until she reached a free space at the other end. Here the furniture was less densely packed. In fact, 3 armchairs had been shoved together around an uncluttered area, wide enough to provide legroom for 3 people, providing they did not mind a tight squeeze. To her left, a door opened onto total darkness. She expected him to rush headlong out of the room into the dark in a final attempt to escape her, but to her astonishment, he threaded his way carefully in the opposite direction until he reached the circle of chairs. He entered it and sat down in one of them. After a second's hesitation, she followed his example. Can I just read a couple more paragraphs? Because something really funny happens. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs. And then, okay, so they're in these chairs in this dark, paint-smelling house. Without warning, the dark space opposite her was lighted up. Her heart sank as she stared at a green wall, still shining with wet paint. It hurt her eyes. A woman stepped into the visible area, her heels sounding on the floorboards. She was wearing a print dress, and over it a long brown sweater, which obviously belonged to a man. "Are you there, Franklin?" she called out, and she walked into the vestibule and switched on a second light. She stood still and looked at him. "I thought I heard you come in," she said. Her voice was flat, and her posture at that moment did not inspire Mary with respect. "Come to visit Franklin?" she asked, as if suddenly aware that her son was not alone. "I think I'll visit for a while." She advanced toward them. When she reached the circle, she squeezed in and sat opposite Mary. "I hoped we'd get a visitor or 2 while we were here," she said to her. "That's why I arranged this little sitting place. All the rest of the rooms are being painted, or else they're still too smelly for visiting. Last time we were here, we didn't see anyone for the whole 2 weeks. But he was a baby then. I thought maybe this time he'd contact when he went out. He goes out a lot of the day." She glanced at her son. "You've got some dirt on that chair," she remarked in a tone which did not express the slightest disapproval. She turned back to Mary. This is an adult woman talking to a little girl she's never met before in this house. She turned back to Mary. "I'd rather have a girl than a boy," she said. "There's nothing much I can discuss with a boy. A grown woman isn't interested in the same things a boy is interested in." She scratched a place below her shoulder blades. "My preference is discussing furnishings. Always has been. I like that better than discussing styles. I'll discuss styles if the company wants to, but I don't enjoy it nearly so well. The only thing about furnishings that leaves me cold is curtains. I never was interested in curtains, even when I was young. I like lamps about the best. Do you?"
The word, something we love about Jane so much is utter strangeness, and it's just never what you would expect. But specifically, I love that story so much, and there's not a lot of representations of childhood in Jane Bowles' work, but the ones that are there are so strong and so unforgettable. That one, and our young Christina Goring in 2 Serious Ladies. And I don't know what, it's everything, every type of character she does is fascinating, but when it's children, there's no twee happening. They're almost eerie. The children are presented in this sort of eerie tone, but it's being young and trying to make sense of the world is terrifying and insane, and I think I relate to these children perfectly, and I think young Mary and A Stick of Green Candy, I don't know, I feel very like I know her.
Well, I was just going to say that in 2 Serious Ladies, also with Christina Goring, she presents children as uncivilized. They will say whatever they want to say. So, for instance, this child, and in the pit, first of all, you think of some kind of absurdist play. You see this pit, and she's sitting in it, and how she talks to him is not civil, right? I mean, it's in some other world, and it's the girl. She hasn't yet become a girl. She has not been administered, let's say, in the way that you would have a civilized conversation. And going into the conversation about furniture, it's so funny because it simply exaggerates the way people will talk about what they're interested in.
Mhm.
You know, and suddenly, suddenly someone will start talking, you know, especially if you don't know the person, you're at a dinner party. And they'll start talking about trout fishing or something. I happen to get interested in that stuff because it's so bizarre to me, but she's in the most subtle way exaggerating what is usual, and in Two Serious Ladies, when she has stuff with Arnold, this young man who can't do anything right, really, and he's always exaggerated, but they have a conversation as if it were usual.
Can I say one more thing
Yeah.
about the child thing?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's so right. And I also think, I mean, one thing that is true about children is that they have no past, they have no backstory, right? There's no kind of psychic development, that there's no kind of calcified character that they have, right? But I would say that's true of her adult characters too. No one has a backstory. No one really has an interiority. Things aren't explained in terms of some kind of causal psychic, you know, some kind of stable sense of character or personality, or a set of, you know, identity markers really at all. But what's unique maybe about the children, or what's different, is that they're not bourgeois in the way, they're not ladies, right? So like they're saying just a kind of blunter version of what the adults are saying.
Yeah.
But what's so great about so many of Jane Bowles' characters is that they are, even as adults, they're kind of doing whatever the fuck they want at all times, and without any explanation, like children in a way.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the lack of how they are incomprehensible to each other. So you have these conversations in which two people are talking of similar or about the same thing, but they're not talking about the same thing. And what you're saying about we have no background for them, we may find out some things. For instance, in Two Serious Ladies, Mrs. Copperfield is terrified about going into the jungle. Right? There's no background given. You know, Jane Bowles is so anti-workshop that it's one of the thrills of reading her.
Absolutely.
She just is not going to follow some kind of traceable arc or all those other horrible terms. Obviously, I did not get an MFA. So.
Thank you for that. Well, so just to segue a little bit, but to stay connected as well. Two Serious Ladies. So the word serious, but I think also very important to the book is the word necessary. They both show up numerous times. Like serious is like 16 times in the book. Necessary is 11. But just I'll read just a couple passages with necessary. So young Christina Goring, one of our serious ladies, she likes to play this really fun game called I Forgive You All Your Sins, where you have to take off your dress and get packed with mud and repent. But young, also a Mary, asks, is this game fun? Is it fun? And she says, it's not for fun that we play it, but because it's necessary to play it. And then later, Miss Copperfield explains to our Arnold that Lynne was just talking about her decision to continuously visit the mainland. It is not for fun that I am going, but it is necessary to do so. And then the last example being something from Paul Bowles that he had shared with Jane's biographer, that she would often just wander around the docks until like 5 o'clock in the morning, come home shoeless, and he would say, why would you do this? And she said, because that was the one place I didn't want to be. I'm terrified of it. So why did you go? I had to, or I couldn't face myself in the mirror tomorrow if I hadn't gone, because that was the one thing I was afraid of. In other words, it was necessary that she do it. So I was just curious if both of you, like, what you make of this seriousness and this necessariness that is clearly strong.
I'm thinking about that young Jane Bowles read Simone Weil as a child and was kind of obsessed with her, and seems to share her ethic of renunciation and almost, moral or spiritual, some kind of moral or spiritual calling, and seems to experience her decision making as like incredibly urgent, and kind of impulsive, but takes it incredibly seriously. Nothing is frivolous. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something self-punishing about a lot of the decisions. I mean, I'm interested in reading this time around. I was like thinking about how kind of bourgeois all the characters are, and how these are often women in kind of, these are, at least in the case of some of the women in Two Serious Ladies, like gay women in hetero partnerships who are, have all of the kind of resources, like financial and material resources they need, and their lives feel kind of, there's something inauthentic perhaps about their experience of their own life, and so they're kind of like waiting for moments of like, intensity and seeking moments of intensity, and sometimes those moments of intensity are like really I don't know, random and strange. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's not, that makes it sound more coherent. That makes it sound more coherent than it is, I think. But
For me, I feel like this necessariness is coming from a place of intense mistrust of the rules put around her, and being suspicious of what it means to be proper, or what it means to have wealth. Let's get rid of that. Let's, like, why is it bad to get rid of that? Let's explore that. It just feels like this sort of anxiety and mistrust to define or to figure out how to be happy or how to be comfortable living. It's coming from like an anxious place in my view.
Yeah, and an attraction toward kind of negative affect.
And this idea of necessity and her going to the dock, well, it's counterphobic behavior, and I understand that totally, because I think much of my relationship to a lot of things has been going against my fear. And in Two Serious Ladies, Mrs. Copperfield is very afraid. Miss Goring is not afraid. She just marches off wherever she wants to go. So there's that. And when you said this thing about gay women being in relationship with heterosexual men, mostly that, well, so Buffy Johnson was a friend and lover of Jane Bowles's, and I knew her some. And when she and I were talking, she told me that her husband was homosexual and she was a lesbian, and this was in the 30s or 40s. And she said, we all did that then. We all married each other. And that was the way in which they could live in society and be sub rosa in a way. And she said, of course, that was Jane, although apparently Paul Bowles did have a sexual interest in her, and she was uninterested. Nonetheless, they loved each other deeply and stayed together for all her life. The thing about there being middle-class women or having money, yes, it's presented, but that too is an absurdity, because the way in which they live is always in opposition to the way they're supposed to be. And so they, you could say they are rebellious, but they're not written as rebellious. See, one of the things that's so interesting, she doesn't code her characters in the way that most writers do. She doesn't give you a sense of who they think they are, and that leaves that character so out in the open that when I think about the beginnings, and there being money, and they're having the ability to live as they do, it becomes even more absurd. That means nothing to them, There's so many things that have been flashing through my mind since you said what you said, and you said, so let's go on.
Yeah, it's dense. I mean, the other thing about her is, so I don't know if you all felt like this, but I was always irritated with the way Jane Bowles was talked about. It was before I even had, explored her myself, but it was always kind of as a subtext to Paul Bowles, and kind of just sort of misogynistic, and it always just really irritated me. And obviously, we're not trying to bring that sort of energy into the conversation, but I do feel like that is like faded away now, and I'm very glad for that. I don't feel like that's the way that.
But he also disappears too. I mean, one of the things about their having been expatriates was that they made themselves un-American, American. They were not interested in being in America, and that already, I think, made this nationalistic country suspicious of them. Why would they do that? So he dropped out of sight, and I don't think many people read Paul Bowles either. And you and I were talking before in the cab coming here that some people blame Paul Bowles for Jane not writing that much, but because he became a writer also, not just a composer. But in fact, she was so self-destructive that from a very early age, she was drinking herself to death. And that's why she had a stroke and all of this. So Jane's being known as Paul's wife, let's say, was in part her doing.
Right.
I mean, she disappeared. By 1948, she never wrote another word. So her career was very short. She did write letters, and she kept something of a diary, which I think is in Austin, Texas. Yeah, that's where her archive is.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
well, there's as we know, there's these are the works. There's a finite amount of works that we have of hers. Obviously, it'd be great if there were more. There's not, but I feel like this work is endlessly expansive in a way that not all writing is of course, but also not even great writing isn't something that you can re-enter and have it be different and open up in a new way every single time. I think we've all said that we've reread her. I think she's endlessly rereadable because it's there's Two Serious Ladies. There's so much dialogue. There's so much going on, and depending on where you're at, you can kind of tease something else out. So I feel like even though it's limited work, it never feels like you've experienced it because you can reread and continue exploring it for all time. And also we were talking about the importance of keeping her in print, which is another reason why these new editions are so welcome and important.
I wonder if you think this too. I think because her writing is so surprising, I mean, genuinely surprising, you do not expect that this adjective is going to come up or that. And I think that's why it can be reread because you are being asked to think of another way that that adjective works. Jean Rhys, a very different writer, but Jean Rhys also is incredibly surprising in the way that she uses language. But there's no one like Jane Bowles. Who has read Two Serious Ladies already? Oh wow! So these are the cognoscente.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about, when I became aware of Jane Bowles, speaks more to my patchy education and literary ignorance maybe, but I heard of her before I heard of Paul Bowles. I heard of her because she was this kind of culty, feminist, modernist kind of icon. And I think of myself as a poet, and I found her partly because of the way she totally dispenses with the conventions of literary fiction. I found the kind of surrealist kind of movement of her work to be really instructive to me as a poet, in particular. So,
and yet she maintains a narrative structure.
Kind of.
I think it's there, and that would separate her from a lot of the modernists. See, for me, when I found her and read that book, it allowed me to think that you could write about girls and women, and you could do it in a way that was unsentimental, that was different. The modernists, there wasn't very much room for girls and women, though there were many female modernists. And the writing about that, you have all these great books about young boys becoming men and all of this, but the way in which girls were treated in writing was, to me, so limited. And then there's Jane Bowles, and then something else happens, because the girls, the way in which they talk is just something else. They're not conforming to any idea of femininity or what girls should speak like or what they should think like, nothing. And then I saw that what I was wanting to do and trying to do was, it was like she gives you a license. Go ahead, do what you want to do,
I think we're at that time to see if we have questions from our lovely audience.
Or just comments.
Comments.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
right. That's right, Lynne, Tillman. Does anybody have a question or a comment? Yes.
Yeah, I have a comment. I was just thinking about when I first discovered her, and I think it was because of something Tennessee Williams said, maybe in a Playboy interview in the late 60s or early 70s.
Who said
Was Tennessee Williams. That superlative, he said something like she was the best writer in the English language, and then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
He said it was his favorite book.
I'm repeating our comments and questions for our audience at home, but just she has a lot of incredible accolades from so many great writers. But yeah, you were drawn to her through Tennessee Williams talking about
But
her.
I guess my question would be about her play, because I know that it was not a success in the 50s when it was done, but I saw the revival with Diane Wiest at Lincoln Center that I thought was incredibly good. It totally worked. So I'm curious, especially when you're thinking about structuring a novel, structuring that narrative, and then you have a play that has a more traditional structure in a way, like traditional sense of structure. What do you think of that play and her playwriting?
What do we think of that play and her playwriting for our friends on?
So there are two plays that I know of. One is the bigger, longer one, and the other one is
Quarreling Pair.
The Quarreling Pair, which actually I did with another writer, very well-known writer.
Well, it's on Art. I got the video is out there to see. I watched it. It's on Artist. You did it at Artist Space.
Yes.
It's great.
Puppets?
Yes.
Yes, but I'm just trying to think who it
Well,
was.
Nick Mouse was part of it, right? And then
Oh, Nick Mouse made the stage
Yeah.
set, and it was,
I don't know. I didn't know the other writer.
Oh, she's very well known,
Mm.
and it's just skipping.
Mm.
She's extremely skinny. Great face.
Well, no, but she
Well, what about that play though?
But
was
what
it
about
like?
that? But it is again absurd, and
Yeah.
unlike anything, these are meant to be sisters who quarrel all the time, and they quarrel about a glass of milk.
Mhm.
And whoever she was, and it's going to come. It's going to come back. Anyway, she sat on one side of this structure that Nick Mouse made, and he also made some puppets. And I guess he was manipulating the puppets,
Mhm.
but we weren't looking there. We were looking out at the audience. And like everything she did, it just didn't have a beginning, and it just happened. It was just like this thing that was happening in front of you. There was no explanation for it, and it was very funny. And I think her other play too, you know, now, this may be a real, I sometimes wonder, had she been a man, like somebody like Ionesco, the French playwright who wrote extremely absurd plays, or had a name like Beckett's, or if this would have been more accepted. She was going against so many things that were also would have been identified as not how women think, all that bullshit, you know. And so I wonder if that play wouldn't have done better
Mhm.
if it was, you know, by a man who was well known for his absurd tales. Have you thought about that with her reception?
I mean, probably. I think I think something we haven't touched on explicitly is her totally crushing writer's block,
Mhm.
Yes.
and her sort of dipsomania.
Yeah.
And I think those things make it hard to build a kind of self-sustaining literary career if you're, you know, I mean, Paul Bowles said that thing of, you know, she felt other writers, and butchering this, but other writers, you know, they take the tools they're given and they construct the structure. She felt she had to manufacture the hammer and the nails
Right.
herself.
Mhm.
Every time she went to the page, she felt that she had to kind of like reinvent language itself, which is, you know, tied, of course, to the strangeness and genius
Mhm.
and just utter idiosyncrasy of her style, but also, you know, perhaps
It was a
it
pain.
was really
Torture,
torture
yeah.
for her.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that she did most of her, or much of her writing. Two Serious Ladies actually was started in this neighborhood I read.
Mm.
In the February house.
In the February
a
house,
couple
yeah.
blocks away.
That's an interesting
But a
book.
lot of her writing, you know, most of this was, you know, was written overseas also. So some of it has to do with also, I think, this question of being in the right place, having the right, you know, a kind of a Americanized readership. She wouldn't have had that for this pretty small body of work. I don't know.
Writers disappear, and sometimes they come back, you know, but there's no certainty about any of that. And when collected short stories of Paul Bowles came out, I remember seeing it in a bookstore in Soho that, of course, no longer exists. And suddenly people were interested in Paul Bowles. Here was this big fat book of his very bizarre short stories. But then nobody was talking about him again after 2 years. I mean, just what makes that happen? Well, much is about the Academy, who gets into the canon, you know, all of that.
It's insane how fast time goes
Yeah.
when you're having fun with Jane Bowles. But does anybody else have a question or a comment? Well, then we can keep talking. I just want to.
I want to have a drink.
Yeah. I just want to mention not the book Playing Pleasures, but the story, because it's the first story in this book, And it's actually depicted on the cover, I realized, with the string of pearls and the gravy. But that I think is actually my my favorite story today by her. It's a real pleasure to read, but just an example of what her strangeness and what she does that gives us so much, just by her funny choices. I believe it's Miss Perry is the main character, and if you know it, you know it. If not, she's pursued by her neighbor, John Drake, I think it is. And she acts very odd and gets drunk and doesn't act like she likes him. And it's a delight to read, and you will read it. But at the very end, the last sentence is, she says, "My sweet John Drake." And that's the last thing you think that would come out of her mouth, given the entire story you just read. Obviously, that's so much more like life than anything, that our thoughts don't necessarily match our actions or what we say, or that maybe we don't even understand it. But she is giving all of us that, just in that one choice of ending that story in that way.
You want to reread it.
And
you want to see where you might have missed some cue, something that was happening,
Yeah.
or that so much is ironic that she's actually saying something that she means in the opposite way. You know?
Well, that whole thing about diving back in, I feel like the very last sentence of Two Serious Ladies, it's kind of like, okay, just flip back to the start and start reading again in that same way. Yeah.
It's sort of heartbreaking thinking about Jane Bowles, actually.
It really is.
You know?
Her, the end of her life just seems
It's horrible.
so tragic and so sad. But we celebrate her. I think.
Yes, we do.
I think that's our time, though. I don't want to cut anything short, and I want to talk.
If you want to talk for 5 more minutes, go ahead and keep chatting for 5 more minutes.
Are there any questions? Yeah.
What is it that other things people might want to say, not necessarily ask us? So many of you have read Two Serious Ladies.
Well, while they think on that, you have written a screenplay, or you adapted it.
I adapted Two Serious Ladies.
What was that process like, and what kind of choices did you have to make?
Well, I just hewed to her dialogue. You know, I mean, this is the greatest dialogue, you know, and I really wanted to make a film of it. I had written and co-directed an earlier film, and I thought, okay, I can be a writer and a filmmaker director. Of course, that's really was impossible to be. And then I was stopped by copyright. But I could see at that time, so this is the 80s, I was thinking of Lily Tomlin as Miss Goring. I could just see her be the most incredible Miss Goring. And who was it? It was an English actor I wanted for Mrs. Copperfield, somebody, maybe Miranda Richardson, who always seems to have a lot of fear in her. But it didn't happen. But I did take the script to Tangier when I met Paul. We'd been corresponding before for a long time. And I gave him the script, and he'd be warned about my coming with the script. Really, it was pretty awful. And he said, I have to go to the beach now. I'll see you tomorrow. So when we got back there, he said, I like the script very much, and because you use Jane's words, you used, you know, why would you write something? Why would you write other dialogue, for instance? I mean, what an insane idea. But he said, I can't help you. And that was the end of it for me. That was, you know, I wasn't going to. But I could always see it as a film, you know.
When there's writing that people that you love so much, you're passionate about, I'm usually very protective of it. But this is work. Actually, I want to see. I would love to see an adaptation of it, or a film, or even of a story. Like, I think it really.
I showed the script to Richard Foreman years ago, and it had many characters in it. I mean, there are many amazing characters in Two Serious Ladies, and I think I tried to have all of them. And he said, if you could reduce this to 6 characters, I could think about doing it. I had no idea that I could reduce it that way, which is too bad, you know.
Well, it was originally 3 serious
Yeah.
ladies,
Yeah, we
right?
did.
And then Paul said, take some of the ladies out.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
ended up in here.
Yeah, and I don't know how the different stories have been shuffled in the other editions, but I do think it's nice the way they're presented
yeah.
here, where it's clear that that is the third
That they
serious
were
ladies.
excised from Two
Yeah,
Serious Ladies.
but I do feel like that was a strong edit. Like, exactly as is exactly how this book
Well,
should be.
because, you know, 3 can be really a problem, that triangle thing. And so you have these 2 very different characters in relationship to each other. I think it's brilliant in that way.
Yeah. Well, that is our time. Thank you so much.
Exactly. That's all I have to say. If you're with us on YouTube, you can check that out in the description in the link below. And if you're with us here, we have plenty of copies for gifts and for yourself and for rereading, like you guys said. And we also have Maggie and Lynn's books up for sale at the front, so you should check that out.
Freshly signed.
Freshly signed. The ink is wet, y'all. And just be mindful of all your things, because we have to turn this place back into the bookstore. So just grab your stuff when you get up, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.